Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first edition of Inside the OC with Matt Cannizzaro and Daniel Farish. My name is Matt Cannizzaro. Daniel here. Today we are joined by four-time Eagle winner Matt McNiel. It's a pleasure, Matt, to have you here. Daniel, Matt, welcome.
Hey, thanks, guys, for having me. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you guys any chance I can get, since obviously we wasn't able to keep my dates in April. So I moved them July, so hopefully, fingers crossed, July will happen. I'll get to see you guys again, but it's good to catch up with you guys here today.
All right, well, folks, my role at the OC since 2005 has been as the PR, Public Relations Manager, and of course, that job has evolved as technology has evolved too. Obviously, here we are doing a podcast from three different locations across the United States. And Daniel Farish joined us last year for the first time in the PR department. He is our stats guy, our analyst, and he is coming to us today from Louisville, Kentucky. Daniel, any opening thoughts?
Louisville, Kentucky. Well, if we're gonna run this podcast, I've got to fix that right now.
You got to say it right.
Yes, I'm not going to listen to that for however many dozens of episodes. Louisville, Kentucky. And my thoughts are, I'm looking forward to this podcast, all the guests we're going to have on. And you said I'm a stats and analyst guy, and there are a lot of stats attached to this man right here.
All right. Well, first let's just catch up on what's happening right now. Of course, again, Matt, you're in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. There, I'm in Texas. Daniel in Kentucky, and just some interesting things happening in the world, Matt. And in this crazy time, you're actually moving, and in an odd Friends sitcom kind of way, it's to the building across the street, almost like you've been watching and waiting for those folks to move out. You showed me yesterday the view from your current apartment to the condo across the street. But talk about these last couple of days and weeks for you.
It's weird because society is shut down. Bowling centers are shut down. Pro shops are shut down. A big part of my role at Storm is going to be working with the PWBA and the PBA 50 bowlers while they're out on tour. Obviously, those events are TBD, or to be announced, to be determined. And then, of course, just coming off the World Series where we had, I led the Cheetah Championship. That's, who knows when I'll bowl that or where I'll bowl that. So it's kind of an interesting time. And then to throw everything else in with myself and my girlfriend, Jessica, we closed on a condo on March 2nd, and it's literally across the street. And it's a really nice old brownstone that was built in the late 1890s here in downtown Minneapolis. And so I'm part of my daily duties is taking a carload of stuff, over to when the Salvation Army was open, for donations, as you kind of declutter your lives a little bit. As I'm sure, Matt, with moving, you're a guy that moves, once or twice a year. So, it's plenty busy, and we're redoing the bathrooms, having the floors redone, new appliances, new lighting. It's craziness.
You mentioned that we do move twice a year for the Open Championships, and I have this very expensive storage unit here in Fort Worth, Texas. This is my first time actually in the area this time of year. It turns out I'm incredibly allergic to Fort Worth, Texas, the Metroplex. So if I run off camera here, uncontrollably sneezing, I have complete confidence that you guys can handle things the rest of the way. But all jokes aside, we have a lot to talk about. Certainly, Matt, your legacy at the Open Championships has been phenomenal. And Reno, especially, that's where we're headed in 2020. A very special place for all of us, really. And Daniel, his first opportunity to compete at the Open Championships was at the NBS in 2010. I will let Daniel talk a little bit about that experience, and then, of course, we'll get into what happened for Mr. McNiel that same year.
Well, I remember, like you said, the year 2010 was kind of the year that Matt, you broke out. Of course, this is the 10-year anniversary of that event. I remember my first tournament. It was my highest all events ever. I shot 2020, which was 300 pins lower than the record you set that year. And that's kind of what I want to get into. It was 10 years ago that you set what still stands as the Open Championships regular all events record at 23-26. Shot 780 in team, 740 in doubles, and then 806 in singles. I mean, we watch people in league go unconscious for a night and shoot 800. We see guys at city or state tournament have a good couple of days, but talk about what it's like on a stage that big to shoot numbers like that on back-to-back days. Different variations of the pattern. 2010, Matt, both of you can correct me. We were fresh and burned back then, correct?
Yep. And back in those days, you only got, I believe, and Cannizzaro is going to have a better recollection of it than me, but you didn't get practice. You got like 2 shots on each lane, I think. You didn't get timed practice on your starting doubles pair. So that's why the stub lane was so important back then, is because you literally had to use that to get loose. And then you only got, I think it was 2 shots on each lane. And then you swapped pairs. You flip-flopped after your doubles event was complete. So, yeah, I mean, it was kind of just who knows who you're following and what they're going to do. And yeah, it was just kind of like, whatever you get.
We came into that event, of course, thinking that the 23-21 from the year before, Ron Vokes, was going to be untouchable. When that was shot, I think everybody, and yourself included, you mentioned this yesterday, thought that was a number that we weren't going to see anybody come close to anytime soon or ever at that point. And obviously that changed.
Yeah, I remember watching the video that you guys had put out. And, you did your interview with Ron and watching the clips. And I'm like, I was sitting in the pro shop with Carl Fitek. I remember we watched it online. And I said to Carl, I said, that score will never be beat. I said, the pigs will fly, my hair will fall out before that score ever gets touched. I bet somebody probably doesn't even come within 20 or 30 pins of that score again, because it's such a monster. I mean, you don't think you're going to show up at nationals and go 500 and some over. It's implausible. You just don't think that's doable. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest benefit that I had going for me in 2010 was I just had such a lackluster, mediocre experience on the lane score-wise at the Open Championships. I just really hadn't done anything crazy. And so, I just kind of, it was ignorance is bliss. I wasn't totaling up the scores in my head. I was just really, really trying to keep my ball reaction what it was and make the right moves and keep making great shots. And that was really it. I didn't even know what I needed going into the 10th frame of the last game of singles. I just didn't. I wanted to shoot 800. That was more my thing. I'm like, God, I really want to shoot 800 at nationals. And so I just needed a fill. I needed a 16 pin fill. And I slammed the first one, and then I wrapped a 7 the second one and made it. I'm like, oh yes, I shot 800. I think it's like in the top 5 for singles, but man, what a great day. This is a really good tournament, and then I came back and one of my teammates, he goes, you just beat Vokes' score. And I literally just kind of like went limp-legged. Like I almost just, I couldn't believe it. I really could not believe that I had knocked that many down.
I will never forget that moment either. Being the camera guy right behind you, it's like it was yesterday. Yeah, it was 10 years ago. But you're right. At that point, he told you, they were hugging and everything, high fives, and he told you. And at that point, you collapsed right there in the first part of the seating, because all the energy, all the emotion, everything at that point just left your body. You just completely crashed out there. And it was amazing. It was emotional. It was real. I think that was the most impressive and special part, at least for us as the onlookers. Everybody else knew what was happening. And the realization for you could see it, that moment when it clicked for you. And then what it meant to you, of course, where you grew up in Minnesota, the Open Championships has such an important legacy and the prestige and the guys that you grew up around. It was your goal to come to the Open Championships and succeed. You got a taste of that in 2007, shooting a 782 in singles and getting your first interview in your debut, and then have something to work from. And of course, the Todd Savoys and the Sam Lantos and all the guys that you bowl with and looked up to, it's what you wanted to do. And at that moment, you've gotten there.
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. I remember, I'd got to watch Mike Rose take the lead in 2008, and I just watched in amazement. And, I was just one of those guys on the pair, and I watched it happen. I was like, God, that would be so cool. I wish I could do that. I want to do that. And then I remember in 2009 in Las Vegas, I was bowling when he took the lead again, but he got third that year, I believe. But he had taken the lead again. And correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong on that.
You're off by a year, but still the excitement was there. It was 2008 in Albuquerque. He was the defending champ. Yep, and he was standing in front of the ball return, just playing a part of the lane that it was obscene and awesome at the same time. And he got to the lead, and again, looking to become the first player to win back-to-back, to get to that top spot. What a day that day as well.
Yeah, and that was the year I'd bowled with his group in 2008. I'm starting to age out here a little bit, or my years are starting to blend together. Yeah, I'd bowled with his group in 2008. Actually, I had to bowl with a classified team for team event because I didn't have anybody to bowl with that year. And then I bowled with Jay Nephew and a couple other guys from his group. And so I got to watch that. And I said, God, I want that so bad. I want to do that. That just is awesome. I mean, win, lose, or draw, you just want to be in the position and have the chance to do it. And so that was one of Mike Rose was really a huge, huge motivator for me to try to, keep working hard, keep practicing, keep bowling tournaments. And I just I kept developing and kept maturing. And I, everything kind of came together that day in Reno in 2010. And then after that, it was just, the gates were kind of just wide open. And once you do it, you feel like you can do it. You know you can do it. You believe you can do it. And then I think I just became a lot more aggressive when I came to the tournament.
Now, before we move on to 2011, go ahead, Daniel.
I had one more question about 2010. Matt, you mentioned that you had your results before that year had been lackluster. So it wasn't like we were watching your numbers slowly build up to this. You hadn't broken 1900 in your first 3 years, and then you shoot 400 pins better than any number you had previously posted. You talked about after setting that number in 2010 that you bowled so bad at the Masters a few months before at the stadium. You worked with then silver coach, now gold level coach Mike Jasnow to fix some things in your game. Was there one big thing that changed between 2009 and then 2010, or between Masters and the OC that year, or was it just a lot of small things that added up to this humongous block?
I think it's always the small things. When you get to higher levels in bowling, it's generally the small things that make the big differences. I remember I worked with Jasnow. I'm a huge field player. And me and Mike go way back. He's got a VHS of me when I was like 15 years old on lane 81. So we go a pretty far ways back. And I think it was, if I remember right, we were working on just some timing things and a couple positioning things here and there, but it wasn't really anything crazy. And I went home and I worked with it a little bit. I think what ultimately it was, and this is, we got time, so I'm going to tell this story. At the Masters, my friend Eric Vermillier, who is multiple time, Eagle winner, Team USA, Junior Team USA, introduced me to a guy named Dave Smart. And because Eric was throwing a lot of 900 global equipment at the time. So he introduced me to Dave, and I was talking a little bit to Dave, and I'm like, yeah, I work for Carl Fitek and, at On Track Pro Shops with Scott Pohl, Gary Arnson. And he's like, well, we're trying to get a little more exposure. Could I send you a couple balls and, drill them up, try them out. And if you like them, maybe put a couple on the wall. I'm like, absolutely. So we exchanged contact info. And then I think I'd followed up with him a little ways down the road, and he sent 2 balls over. He sent I think it was like a bounty hunter pearl and a breakout. And I was like, okay, well, I looked at Carl. The box came and we put it on the counter at the shop. And I looked at Carl. I said, well, which one do you want? And he goes, well, I don't know. Which one do you want? Well, I'll try this pearl thing. And I drilled it up, and it was okay. It wasn't horrible. But we weren't like, oh, man, I got to, drill another one of these. And Carl had just never drilled the breakout. So the breakout sat in the back room on the shelf. And I was actually throwing a lot of Storm equipment at the time. Coincidentally enough, here I am, so fortunate to be working for Bill and Barb and for Storm. But I was throwing pretty much all Storm. And I was really chomping at the bit to try to get on Storm staff at that time. So, fast forward a couple months, it's like, it's April. I'm really not throwing the ball all that much better than I was at the Masters, which wasn't very good. It's kind of, you just, in athletics, you go through those periods, right? Where everything just doesn't feel good. You don't see the lane the right way. Mm-hmm. You're every now and then, I mean, even in league, okay, you have a good, decent night, but then you have a couple mediocre nights, you bowl a couple tournaments, and it's not really all that great. And you don't feel confident. Things aren't going your way. So I remember 2 of our teammates were driving out to Reno, and they had stopped by the pro shop. Or they were going to stop by the pro shop. I was getting my stuff. I was going to FedEx my stuff, UPS it. I think through the shipping service. And
Bowling Ball Express, perfect plug. Excellent, thank you.
There's my plug for Bowling Ball Express. I used that for many years. So I was going to ship my stuff out there, and so I had everything ready, and so I had the printout. I was going to take it over to the UPS store. And Carl was like, and this is really because of Carl. And he goes, well, why don't you take a new ball out there just to have a fresh cover? I said, you know what? I said, with how bad I'm bowling right now, I'm just hoping to shoot 1850. I said, I'm not bowling. I'm not exaggerating. This conversation happened. Okay. Wow. This is all honest God's truth. And so Carl's like, well, we got that breakout still sitting in the back. I'm like, oh, you never drilled it? And he goes, no. And he goes, why don't you take that out there? I said, Carl, I'm not even going to waste the money to have somebody else drill it, one of those booth guys and whatever, and I just don't even want to deal with it because I'm not going to drill a new ball, not throw it at all, and then just try to use it. He goes, well, I still think you should take it out there. What's the worst that can happen? I said, I'm not. So I'm leaving. So I leave, because, in your 20s, when you're in your 20s as a male, you think you know everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so I just left, and our 2 teammates came by, Carl, Phytech, looking out for me, put the ball in the car. Okay. And it's the ball, right? And I just hadn't known it at the time. So the ball gets driven to Reno by our teammates. And we get there, I think, like 2 days early. We bowled the BJ a couple times over at the Grand Sierra. I bowled horrendously. I mean, it was bad. It's just horrible. Feel was horrible. Nothing was going right. Carl, once again, hey man, I brought that ball. Why don't you drill it up? I said, dude, I'm telling you, man, I might as well drill a square. It would roll the same. I go, this isn't going to work. I said, I don't even want to spend the $40 or the $60, whatever these guys are going to rake me over for to drill a ball. So he's like, all right, whatever, man. So the next night comes, we go bowl the BJ again. I bowled horrendously again. And we sat at the bar and had a couple margaritas. And finally, after a couple margaritas, Carl's like, dude, just do it for me. And I'm like, okay. I said, fine. Now, I had bowled Junior Olympic Gold. It was called Junior Olympic Gold back then. And I'd bowled Junior Olympic Gold with, and I'd crossed a couple times with a guy named Sean Ryan, who works for Storm, who is one of the smartest, most talented people in the bowling industry that I've ever been around. And Sean was working the hammer booth back then. So I grabbed the ball, I went to Sean Ryan, and I was like, hey man, I'm going to use this ball for team event. Oh, back then it was one pattern, actually. I just said, can you drill this ball up? Because there wasn't multiple patterns. So I said, hey, I'm bowling team tomorrow night. Can you punch this ball up? He goes, yeah, sure. Yeah. And so I grabbed the Pro Sec and I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't really know anything about this thing. Maybe and Sean, in his infinite wisdom, to this day, I'm forever grateful. He grabbed the Pro Sec and the grease pencil out of my hand. He said, I'll take care of it. Just come back tomorrow. Don't worry about it. I'm like, okay, fine. So I come back the next day. I grab the ball. It's done. And gave Sean whatever he charged me. And, went back to the paddock, went through the scale room and everything. And, and Carl said, well, why don't you put the new ball on the rack and throw it a couple shots in practice? I said, dude, I don't even know what this thing's going to do. I said, it's a waste of time. I said, I'm going to start with this ball and then see what it looks like. He goes, dude, just give it a couple tosses, will you? And I'm still arguing. We're in the squad room about to march out, and I'm still arguing with this man who knows me since I was 15 years old, who gave me my first job in the shops, who's just been such a great influence on my career and my life. And I'm still arguing with him. And so he convinces me once again to give the ball a couple shots in practice. And I remember I just kind of walked up there. I threw the first couple shots up like 6, 7, 8, and it looked pretty good. I left a couple 3 pins, and then I moved a little more left, slowed down a little bit, and it just went 10 back, 10 back, 10 back, 10 back. And I'm like, my eyes got big. I'm like, wow, I haven't seen.
Oh, we remember it as well.
Yeah. And then it was off to the races. And that's the story of the ball. So it was quite a miracle that
wow.
that everything came together the way it did for that ball to get in my hands. Now, had that not happened, do I still shoot the score? I don't know. I can't tell you, but I can tell you the way it happened was just absolutely the universe or religion, whatever you want to say, is somebody was looking out for me.
Well, and when it did happen, it happened 1 year to the day that Ron Vokes set the score that we thought was never going to be touched, which is pretty amazing as well. And then, of course, what has transpired in the years since. Nothing certainly that I could have dreamed of, or you or anybody, the run that you've been on since that day.
Yeah, it's been, I think kind of 2015 was kind of my last gasp. I've had just kind of some decent years since. The Open Championships, if you look at the history of the tournament, there's a lot of different cycles, right? Where certain things are working, certain types of styles are working, certain types of players are having these good runs. And I think with what's going on right now with equipment and the way we're conditioning lanes and everything like that, I'm just in a cycle right now where I'm not seeing it like I saw it that 2010 to 2015 era. It's just changed, and that's on me, the bowler, to figure it out. And every year I do my best to try to figure it out, and I really haven't figured it out to the tune of how I hadn't figured it out before. But I think that's one of the great things about the sport of bowling is that there's that puzzle there, and you have to decipher that code and put that puzzle together to get everything to line up, and so you can see it the right way. And once you see it the right way, that's when you really start putting up the scores, because that's when you start making really, really great shots.
I don't know if you know this or not, but that 6-year stretch you listed, 2010 to 2015, you've averaged 243.11 at the OC in those 6 years.
That's not too bad.
No, it's not.
So as the bowling historians and bowling fans, certainly we're happy to reminisce and talk about some of the amazing things that we saw, that you experienced. And we have 3 different perspectives on the same phenomenon a few years. And after 2010, you weren't done. You came back to the very same venue in 2011, and you tacked up a couple more very impressive scores. And this is on Bowl TV. It happened on the live stream. So I was there with Emil Williams Jr., and then Daniel Farish, hopefully, was at home watching those broadcasts and enjoying them. You got yourself a couple 300 games, a couple more 800s, and, of course, a pretty cool nickname as well.
Yeah, the Matty McHonor score came out when I shot 300 on that pair just to the right of the walkway there. I think it's 29:30. And I remember I pulled the last shot. I pulled it off my hand, and it just kind of laid there and struck. And yeah, and that's where the moniker Matty McHonor score came from Mr. Cannizzaro.
And then, of course, the National Bowling Stadium, always known perhaps as being a little bit lefty friendly. And I think one thing that was pretty special and important to you was to leave the National Bowling Stadium and prove that you still could do what you did. And then we got to see you put up some magical numbers in 2012 as well. Daniel, hopefully, again, you're at home watching this happen. It was late at night, but it was awesome. Can you talk about 2012 from your perspective that year?
Yeah, 2012 was pretty cool. You know, I'd been on 900 global staff for a couple of years. I was getting really, really comfortable with the equipment. I was bowling a lot of tournaments. I'd finished my bachelor's degree, and I was at that point in time. I was looking to go into law enforcement. I'd worked part-time for the Eden Prairie Police Department for 5 years. And I was also interning at the ATF at that time. And so I was doing that stuff, but I didn't have anything full-time going. And so it freed up my schedule to bowl a lot of tournaments. I mean, I was the real true weekend warrior, and I was bowling every weekend. I was bowling a lot of the big regional tournaments in the Midwest, and not PBA regional, just like, you know, bigger, like Joe Engelkiss's tournament and the Minot. There's a big tournament in Minot, big tournament up in Winnipeg. I was bowling all that stuff. And so I was just sharp. I mean, I was really, I think, in one of the good primes of my career. And I came into that event. It was my first year with the Linz Lakers. And to kind of give some background story, in 2011, you know, I kind of, once again, bowling is in that group of athletics where it's like you can have these good highs and you can have these long lows. And that's just kind of how athletics works. You know, you're not going to be tip-top shape all the time. You do have lows, and they make you appreciate the highs. When you're bowling kind of as your main source of income, which I was back then, when the lows happen and they drag on for a little while, it's kind of hard to get through it. And so what happened in 2011 was I really didn't, I was pretty broke, to be completely honest. I had some debt, and I was broke. Like, it just wasn't much money there. And I was bowling tournaments, but I wasn't winning much money. I was at break even, make $100 here, make a couple $100 here, break even, lose a couple $100. You know, it was one of those types of deals. And so 2011, what had happened was I actually sold my car so I could afford to play brackets. And so I went out to that. 2011 was that team event was really tough. I mean, that was just like, I felt a lot of pressure that I hadn't really felt before. And I think when you add some of those things in, you probably aren't the best teammate. I just think I probably didn't treat my teammates very well that set. And I wasn't a very good team player. And luckily I bowled very well. And I made some bracket money, but nobody on the team really had made a whole lot. And I think I acted in a way that was probably childish and not very mature. And I had blamed the guys for not bowling well. And that's just not something you can do. You can't do that to your teammates. And I'm not a perfect person. I'm absolutely free to, I'll admit that I've made quite a few mistakes in my life, but so basically we were counting, splitting up the bracket money, and I really needed the money. And I got a few, I'd made like 6,000 or 7,000, and I think I got back like, I don't know, like $1,200 or something like that. It wasn't a whole lot. And I was just really angry. And so in the haste of me being young and stupid, I said some things to people I really care about that I probably shouldn't have said. And I was pretty self-absorbed and selfish, and said, I'm not going to split brackets tomorrow with you guys, and stormed out of there. And I bowled the next day because I knew I told Jeff Riggles on Facebook, I said, I got an 820 ball reaction. And I went out the next morning, I shot 822, and then I got on the next pair and I didn't make the right moves, and I probably cost myself another back-to-back all events eagle. And that got me thrown off of the Lynn Cedarville team. My behavior was just so unexcusable, and I definitely recognize that, and that got me thrown off the team. So I was in need of a team, and fortunately, Tom Corbett and John East vouched for me to the rest of the Lakers, and said, hey, he's a great player. We'll work with him. We'll try to help him be a better team player. And so coming into 2012, I really wanted to prove myself and just, try to bowl as well as I could. And I remember we bowled the BJ, and it was kind of like a 2010 thing all over again. I wasn't feeling very good. I wasn't just that little week. I just didn't have much feel. I wasn't bowling very well. So I went to a center. Actually, I found a bowling center. I went out and I practiced for about 3 hours until I could really until it felt great. And I came in for team event, shot 790, and then I shot the 847 in doubles. And then I went to 5 and 6. And there was a lot of left-handers that bowled on 5 and 6, Sean Ryan, Eric Pearson, a couple others, that told me that the topography on 5 and 6 isn't very good. And it was one of those things. And I really struggled. I shot like 560, but I muscled through it. And I was fortunate to come out with at that time, my second all events eagle. And then I also got the doubles eagle with Chuck Bashaw.
All right. Now, Daniel, you got to watch all of this happen as a bowling fan at home on Bowl TV. And then you got to go in and bowl against these scores as well. Talk about it from your perspective, and just watching these numbers get put up on arguably one of the toughest environments in bowling.
Well, it's funny because I did the same thing, Matt, that you did in Baton Rouge, except I did my practice session after team event. I bowled really bad in team event, shot like 580. So I went to a center 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from our hotel and threw, 12, 14 games that night after our day team event because I wanted to be better for singles and doubles. I didn't shoot 740, 820 back to back. I shot like 6.0 and 680. So my practice session didn't net me the numbers that yours did. But it was, I've known Matt since our days at what was junior Olympic gold, now junior gold. My first year back in 05. I knew the player you were. I knew what you were capable of. But all the other names on the leaderboard next to some of those scores, I didn't know those names, as a lot of regular bowlers in leagues or their regional type tournaments, they might not know the names at the top of the OC leaderboards. So I'm watching all these names next to these big numbers, and I'm seeing a couple of names like yours that I recognize. But, you bowl this team event, you go, man, I shot 580, and I could not find a motion. But there's guys, there's teams out here shooting 32, 3,300. Like, how do they get there? And it really, as a bowler, you understand how difficult that event is, because you've got to be, not only do you have to be throwing the ball well to bowl well individually, you've got to have the right ball motion, the right ball in your hand. For doubles, you've got to have a partner who's paired up as well as you are. For team event, you've got to have 4 other guys who are on your level, throwing the ball and ball motion. And it's just so difficult. And then it's daunting if you go into that event in May or June and you're a team or a group that seriously thinks you can achieve an eagle, and you see some of these numbers that have been put up. It's like, man, would you rather go in March and set the bar, or do you want to show up in June and try and get over the bar? And a lot of respect can be earned at that tournament. Matt, you've said it in a lot of the interviews I read that you gave before this interview as I was preparing. You said it is the greatest tournament in the world for amateur bowlers.
It is.
And you're dead on.
It is. There's just not an event, an amateur event. There's events that are close, but I just don't feel there's an amateur event out there with the prestige and with the history and the legacy that the Open Championships have. There just isn't. And I think that's the fact that you can get into the Hall of Fame through your performance at the Open Championships, I think tells you how much the sport and the USBC recognize the importance of that event and how much prestige and importance is placed on that event. So, it's something that I look forward to every single year, and come heck or high water, I'm going to be there.
Well, I think we'd all agree there's really nothing like walking down the center aisle with the music playing. Even as I described to Daniel as we prepared for Reno this year, standing at the end of center aisle at the National Bowling Stadium when it's quiet and just looking out and just the vastness of it and what it means to bowling, what it all means. And then you guys both now have had the chance to see the Open Championships from the other side of it. You've been, as the employees, you've had a chance to see the other bowlers have the experience and understand things maybe differently or better than as a competitor, or just maybe have a whole new outlook on the whole event. Daniel, we'll start with you, but last year was your first year in the employee role, and you got to be a part of many of these great moments, but in a different way. And it was your job then to tell the stories. As now you're hearing the stories from Matt McNiel. You could have told these stories in so many different ways with so many aspects. We could have gone on for days, but of course we have to be as concise as possible. But how has the event changed for you now that you've experienced it from the employee side? And then Matt, we'll talk to you also about the year that you came to work as well.
So the biggest example that I have from seeing what exactly this tournament means to people was at the end of the year last year. Everybody's waiting to see where their names are on the leaderboard. The leaders are waiting to see if their numbers hold up. And Derek Magno, who was a member of Minto Produce, who were leading team all events at the end of the tournament and eventually won, he was in Vegas on work duty the last week of the OC. So he was actually in the South Point Bowling Plaza when the final ball was thrown. And of course, this is before everything was officially verified, but unofficially, they had just won team all events. And he shed some tears. And I've had bowling moments where I've shed tears, good and bad. So I understand what it means to love this sport. But I hadn't seen a moment like that at the OC until I saw Derek's reaction to winning that team all events eagle, which is the most prestigious event you can win at the Open Championships. That was my aha moment, so to speak. And it took until the very end of the event. The other moment I had was when Mike Schmid broke the 100,000 pin mark. And I was the video guy down in the pit area videoing it. That moment was up there as well with Derek's team all events reaction.
And Mike, another Minnesota guy who Matt's probably familiar with as well, and helping build the legacy and the excitement of the Open Championships. But Matt, what about your thoughts? I mean, you got to experience it with those guys. They won in 2002 and 2006. Lynn's Lakers did team all events. So you were there to kind of experience the celebration and the excitement, and then your opportunity to get that phone call, and then to come to Reno and work on the showcase lanes and help coach potentially some of the champions from that year's event.
Yeah, it was. I thought working the tournament was one of the best experiences of my life. It was being able to work with teams. I did a lot of team lessons, and being able to work with teams and help them just kind of teach them what I'd been taught. You know, how to break down a pair, how to work as a group, how to communicate with each other, how to be observant, and how to do a lot of these things that I learned from a lot of the guys that had helped me grow up and develop in my career. You know, I got to teach. And what was so great, the best moments, absolutely bar none, during my work was when you'd have a group of guys come down. We shot our first 3,000. We shot our first 3,100. We shot our first 3,200. You know, I had my best all events this year. I had my, you know, we got in the top 10 for doubles. And when those guys would come down or gals or, you know, whoever it was, that was probably the best experiences of working the tournament. And I think it gives you a lot of perspective too. I think when you're a bowler, you're like, you kind of have this very small vision of what, what the tournament is. And you're like, yeah, we come in a couple days, we bowl BJ, hang out, gamble, or have a few beverages, and we bowl, play some golf, go home. Like that's kind of, you don't really see what it means to everybody. And you don't see the guys coming out there for their 50 years or their 30 consecutives or their 40 consecutives. And, the families and the brothers and the father sons and all the team captains that organize 15 teams that have been doing it for 20 some years. You don't see that, and you get like Dan said, you get a really good appreciation for what that tournament means to so many people. And for those people, it's a little different than making bracket money or trying to win an eagle. It's an experience that they've been doing. It's a family tradition. It's a family vacation. That's what it really is to those people. And I think it's really healthy for people to acknowledge that and understand that the tournament is about more than 1% of the people that bowl it. It's about everybody that bowls it, and making sure that they have a great experience when they come bowl the tournament.
Well, and hopefully, we get to be a part of that again soon, and to tell those stories of all those people. Because you're right, if you walk up and down the concourse, you're going to meet hundreds or thousands of bowlers a day who are there for different reasons, whether it's a vacation, the camaraderie, the family aspect. We'll talk to a lot of champions and bowlers on this podcast in the future who came to the event for those reasons, or because dad bowled or grandpa, or because they wanted to experience it as a family, and and then to reach the pinnacle as they did. Again, many of them are going to be tournament winners, but that certainly all plays into it. And Daniel as well, the father-son relationship in the bowling world, as you can see the Garage Pro Shop there in the background, something that's very special to him. And we'll talk to some fathers and sons. And Daniel, again, I would imagine that part of your OC experience, your bowling experience, has a lot to do with your family and your friends, and just wanting to experience that. And then it was your friend Emil Williams Jr. who helped solidify your place on our PR staff as well when we were searching for the next guy. Just talk about all of that encompassing and kind of your transition into your role at the OC.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like what we've all three of us said. You share these moments at the Open Championships, whether your goal is to win an eagle or your goal is to just vacation with your wife and kids or your buddies or your family. The goal is the same, and that's to enjoy the experience. And every year that I've bowled the OC as a non-employee, with last year being the only year I've bowled it as an employee, I never had a group of guys where we stacked a team or we all went in, 5 high caliber players trying to win an eagle. It was always going with buddies from Louisville, a couple of teams I bowled with some college guys, Shea Bittenbender, Brian Valenta. and then for E to do what he did to kind of put my name in your ear. I've known you kind of since you covered Junior Team USA the year that I was on that. To get me out there and to see it from the other side, that was a pretty neat experience last year, and I'm looking forward to getting back out to Reno this year. First time I will have been there in 6 years, to see how things have changed and experience it once more as an employee, and then experience the stadium. You know, going to the stadium is your job every day. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. But, Matt, I want to ask you, you've been at this event longer than McNiel or myself. What does this event mean to you?
Well, I started the event as a competitor in 1999. We made the road trip. We drove from Florida to Syracuse. So immediately it was about the camaraderie, 19 hours in a car with a couple friends, all the stops along the way, and then you get to the event and there's just so much to experience. You see the leaderboard for the first time. Some very intimidating scores. Of course, it takes them probably performances of a lifetime to find your name atop the leaderboard. But then you have to be realistic with your goals and your expectations. And so I did that. And I enjoyed the experience for what it was and what I was capable of. And really, I didn't appreciate it in the same way until I was there before the bowlers came, before the venue was built. And you see it all come together, and it certainly takes on a completely different perspective. And again, you're standing in the venue when it's quiet, and then when there's 300 bowlers for the national anthem, you get the goosebumps. Every time you walk down center aisle, it doesn't matter when it is, you get that feeling, the butterflies, the goosebumps, and then to share the experiences with those bowlers, to see and hear what it means to them to find success at the OC, to see Matt McNiel's legs give out as he breaks the all events record, to meet Ron Vokes, who most people outside of Wisconsin didn't know prior to his performance that day. And then, of course, to talk to the 50-year guys, the 60-year guys. This week, 5 years ago, Bill Lillard broke the all-time pinfall record. Pretty emotional day to be at the OC, to share that, to get it on video, to know those people and hear those stories. It's hard not to get caught up in those moments, even if it's from a different perspective completely. And then to see this orange eagle over my shoulder and what that means to some people in history. And certainly I want to ask Matt about that as well. Many bowlers come to the OC with the goal of seeing that next to their names on the scoreboard. And that's something that we're able to provide in some variation over the years. I happen to be fortunate enough to have one framed here. But that is what the OC means. And it means, it means emotion and celebration and prestige and tradition more than anything, of course. And to be able to experience it with all those guys, no matter what, whether it's your first time and you're just excited that you bowled 600 or you just bowled 2,300, it's phenomenal. And to sit down with those people, everybody has a story. And the fact that we get to tell those stories, whether it be on paper about the fact that the guy just drove there on a motorcycle from the tip of Maine after having a heart attack, or just knocked down 100,000 pins, or just won an eagle, or whatever. Or, I did this for Dad. He brought me here when I was a kid. That is what the OC means to me.
That and the relationships, the friendships and the relationships you get out of it. And I think, Matt, you've been in such a great position where you've got to be with, I think what's interesting about your position, and this is just me as an observer, but you get to be with everybody during the highest of highs. And I think that's pretty cool, because you get to see people during some of the best moments and memorable moments of their lives and their careers. And you get to be a part of that. And I think for you and me personally, I can speak that, we've become really good friends over these years and sharing these moments together. And then, in between those is just all the times we text each other, or go have a beer, or do those kinds of things just as friends. And, if you look at all the stuff behind you, from NABR and, and all these autographs and things of people giving you stuff because they've meant so much, or you've meant so much to them, because you being a part of those moments meant so much to them, and you develop a relationship with those people. I'm just flat out jealous. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, I appreciate every one of those people and those moments. And again, even the ones just walking by, just taking photos and enjoying the OC experience. And I'm glad to be able to share those moments and share it with these guys, Daniel Farish, Aaron Smith, Emil Williams Jr. They've been around now, two of them for more than a decade. So there's something about what we do that makes people want to stick around and sharing it. And one of the best parts of the whole year, I think Daniel mentioned earlier, was the final day of the event, making those phone calls. Matt, you've received those phone calls, and Daniel, you were there. You had the opportunity to make a few as well. These are folks who are waiting 60, 90, 100 days to find out if their bowling dreams just came true. And we're the ones that get to deliver that news. We're the first ones that get to talk to them. First, Daniel, what was it like being able to call the champion and let them know? And then we'll ask Matt, to be at the phone waiting and wondering when is this call going to come?
It's awesome. I mean, you get to call these people and tell them that they've achieved what might be the greatest achievement of their bowling career, whether it's something that, I had a couple of our classified doubles winners from last year. They were a last minute pair up and they took the lead, ended up winning. And they had no clue. They didn't understand what it was until we kind of explained to them, hey, this is what the OC is. And they're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So making that phone call to them and explaining, hey, you all won this. Oh, that's really cool. All the way up to the teams that prepare for months on end and the guys that prepare for months on end to come bowl this event and years and decades and finally get that eagle they've been chasing for 10, 15, 20 years. I was a part of those two phone calls and everything in between last year, whether I was making them or I was in the room with you and tournament director Dwayne Hagan making those phone calls. And that was as cool as anything else from last year.
Matt, same question really on the receiving end of that phone call. You kind of know after a minute that it's coming. You always hope. You never know. Again, we go back to Ron Vokes, about 857 in singles, that same year that he set the all events record and didn't win. Bo Gergen topped him with 862. So until that last ball is thrown, you really don't know. We'll talk to Adam Barta later in our podcast schedule about 2017 and just the fact that he didn't sleep for like 4 straight months and was up every night making flip charts and telling scores and texting and calling. And what are those moments like from the minute you leave the building to not having any idea? At least now there's social media and there's technology. In the past, you had to wait for a telegram even to find out, but and then the phone call finally came.
Well, I'd heard stories of, the guys would subscribe to the local newspaper and they would have the local newspaper of the host city sent to their house because back in the day, the local newspaper would publish all the scores every week. And so that's how guys, this is before the internet and everything like that. So
that's dedication. That is absolute dedication right there.
That is what those guys did, is they would subscribe to the paper so they could check the scores. I don't know what you did with your subscription after, say you open it up one day and they're like, oh, well, I'm not in first anymore. Well, there goes that. But it's really, it's what you make of it. I'll say that, because when, you can, like, let's say you leave in the lead, generally for me, it's been like, late April or like early May. And so you still got 2 months, 2 months and change, June and then July and early July. So you're like, you can do the Adam Barta way. And Adam and Pete, Adam's brother. I mean, these guys are like Rain Men of scorekeeping. Like, you should see these guys when they're bowling tournaments with brackets and everything. I mean, it's like they run it like a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I mean, there are spreadsheets, there is times, dates, numbers, exact. So they know when everybody's bowling, what pair they're bowling on. They got like informants. They've got everything going. So I mean, it is their lives to monitor whether someone's going to beat them or not. I mean, maybe they have voodoo dolls, you know, or things like that going, you know, I don't know, but that's what it is for them. You know, I remember the first time around for me, I was giving bowl.com probably like 100 hits every day.
Thank
And
you.
then,
We appreciate that.
yeah, you're like, you know, because even though you just shot 23, 26, you don't know, well, if I can do it, somebody else can do it. And that's kind of the way you look at it. You have that, and then you look back and you're like, well, if I would have done this or if I would have done that. I think fast forwarding the last go around, the waiting it out period was more just, you know what, I gave my absolute best. And if somebody beats me, my hat's off to them. You'd check, I think I check scores every now and then, but it was more just, I'm at peace with just saying, you know, I bowled the best I could. And, you know, if somebody beats me, I'm happy as heck for them. Getting the call is unbelievable. That's the cool moment. That's one of those, because you have the real high when you bowl, and then you come down, and then it's like, well, I don't know if that high was a real high because I don't know if I'm going to win. Mm-hmm. So you're like, this could be a temporary thing where, oh yeah, you were leading when you left, but sorry to say, you got fourth in the tournament, but you know, yeah, you had a good tournament. You're like, well, so getting the call is like the cementing, you know, you're like, okay, now this is a real high. And so you have another high when you get the call, and it's really unbelievable. There's a lot of emotions, and it's all that hard work. It's all the sacrifice. It's all the late nights you spent practicing, you know, till 2 a.m, being the last one out of the center. It's all the times it's all the little stuff that you did when nobody was watching.
Well, I think we need to have an entire episode just on those phone calls, because there have been some doozies over the years. And, you know, your teammate Sam Lanto in 2006, certainly one of them. We'll save those for another day, though, but certainly one of the more interesting and special parts of what we get to do.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really cool, and I've been lucky to get that call 3 times, and hopefully I get it a few more before I hang up my shoes.
Well, before we wrap up today, as we're getting close to having talked ourselves out, I think we could probably go on for hours and hours. We have a lot of stories, but we're at a time right now where the OC is scheduled to start in 2020 on May 23rd, back to Reno National Bowling Stadium. The office is already set up. We're ready to go. We just have to move in. We'll start with Matt here for our final question. But as you get ready, you've got some new teammates the last few years. Certainly a crazy respect for Reno and the NBS and your performances there. How important, how special, how much would it mean to be able to put all this craziness behind us and get going and get back there and get to business?
Yeah, I think it's going to mean a lot to everybody, just to kind of have that piece of normalcy back to our lives, and especially this tournament. I mean, I know this year is really tough because and I know I'm a captain. I try to organize 10 guys, you know, and trying to get 10 people now with all these travel plans. And, you know, I got guys that bowl a senior tour. I got, you know, if you got, you know, other people with summer vacation plans or families and, you know, kids, you know, sports, summer activities, it's really, really hard. Or, you know, if you have a conflicting vacation plan, it's hard to make it work this year. But I'm really looking forward to coming back to the newly renovated stadium. I miss Reno. I loved living there. I miss the city. It's such a great city. I miss the stadium. I'm excited to see the renovations, and you know, I still got those white pants that I wore in 2010, and those I might have to lose a few pounds to fit back into it. So this extension might benefit me. So I have time now to lose a couple pounds so I can fit back into those white pants that I wore in 2010. So I'm going to bust those out again for singles and doubles.
All right. Well, Daniel, for you, you know, you've competed in Reno. You've done the typical bowler thing, going from the properties to just a couple of restaurants nearby, and but you've had a chance over the last year to hear some of the stories that we could talk about on air, and then of course the ones that we can't. From myself, Aaron Smith, Emil Williams Jr., Matt McNiel, I'm sure has a few as well. This will be your first time seeing Reno in the National Bowling Stadium from this side for the long term. What are you most looking forward to finally getting there and getting to experience and see?
Two things. One, I said this earlier. This isn't the USBC employee or the OC employee in me. This is the bowler in me. I'm really looking forward to going to the stadium every day for work. The first time I bowled back in 2010, a group of guys from Louisville went, and we all dropped our stuff off at the hotel. They wanted to go grab some food. We had just got in town. And I told them, hey, you guys go to dinner. I'll catch up in a little bit. And I went to the stadium and just watched. I sat there and watched for probably an hour and a half. I didn't watch any one person. I wasn't watching for a high score to be set. I don't remember anything standing out. I just wanted to watch bowling at the stadium. So I have a deep respect and reverence for that building. So I can't wait to work in there every day. Hopefully 6 days a week, but a day off would be nice. We'll see if Mr. Cannizzaro is gracious to me for that. And then the second thing is to have that day off, to have the ability to see Reno outside of the walk from Silver Legacy back to the stadium, back to Silver Lake. That's where we always stayed. So I can see the city, and I can go to these great eateries and these great bars and these holes in the wall and see all these attractions, maybe make a trip up to Tahoe, never been there. But I want to be able to enjoy Reno and not just work there.
Well, having been there more days of my career than any other city, any other building, and even for a week this year, the changes, the renovations, they've been ongoing. It looks more awesome than it did if it didn't already look as awesome as possible. The city, the changes, all the things around, the hot spots, the nice spots that we go, the off the path spots. It's all there. Can't wait to get back. May 23rd, it's right around the corner. We're hoping that things turn around a little bit and all of that's possible, of course. I look forward to working with you there, Mr. Farish, and of course, seeing what kind of show Mr. McNiel and his teammates have for us in 2020. Any final thoughts for you guys before we move on?
No, this is great. We should actually just do it more often. I mean, even if we're not recording, it's just, we had a good time last night too, just kind of getting ready for this thing. So we had a lot of fun. So we should, if not, just for the next few weeks while we're still self-quarantining, we should definitely keep this going. It's just really nice to stay engaged with you guys and talk bowling. It's all in our hearts and we all love it. So it's pretty cool. But thank you guys for having me on. I'm really honored to be numero uno for the Open Championships podcast here. This is how out of it I am. I mean, I had a phone with the game Snake on it. I mean, I'm way out of it. So this is what is this called? Was this like a video chat?
This is this is a video podcast inside the OC.
A video podcast. There we go.
Yeah.
See, this is how ancient I am, man. I'm just,
The only final thought I have is I know that Matt, to your standards, you struggled the last couple of trips to the OC. Might we see you break out the breakout and bring it back this year to try and recapture the magic?
Well, if I didn't value my employment position with Form Products, I would. I actually, I donated that ball to West Pie, and they have it. Wes is the president of 900 Global, and of course, 900 Global falls under the Chrisman's business ownership. So I gave that ball and my banner to them. So the ball is on display at the offices of 900 Global. So I guess, if heaven forbid, I really can't see myself working anywhere else than for Bill and Barb. But if it ever happened, or if I got like an owner's exemption,
right?
I don't know. I mean, it would be one of those things, you could throw it a couple of shots and you're like, this ball stinks. It doesn't work. So who knows? But yeah, no, it's I think the ball has done what it needed to do, and it'll just be me wearing those probably very snugly fitting nowadays, white pants.
Well, if you need the white belt back, we'll talk to Aaron Smith. If you need the glasses, we got those here hanging up on the memorabilia wall as well. So the everything, just the legacy of Matt McNiel is now coast to coast.
Yeah, I might have to break into your guys' collection and take a few of those items back, or borrow them for the event.
Well, Matt, whatever you end up doing this year, good luck to you, and I can't wait to see you out there.
All right, thanks. Likewise, Dan.
All right, now if we can talk Aaron Smith and the rest of the guys into it, a little Bowl TV after dark maybe, happy hour, virtual happy hour with Matt McNiel. We'll give you a call if that's possible down the road as well. But folks, we appreciate everybody tuning in for the first edition of Inside the OC with Matt Cannizzaro and Daniel Farish. That is going to do it. If you have any comments, thoughts, certainly share those with us, and we'll be back soon with our next episode.